Hi, my name's Vanessa. I'm 32 years old. I live in Coquitlam, British Columbia. My husband and I were born and raised in Peterborough, Ontario, and I have a 7-month-old son named Vincent. When I was diagnosed with epilepsy, I was 10 years old, so at the time that was when you're in grade 5. It was actually my sister that noticed something was off with me, and it ended up being that we didn't really know what was going on, so that led us to go to the doctor and actually get some tests done, and it ended up being that I was diagnosed with epilepsy, and what was being noticed was me having absent seizures. So my experience living with epilepsy has been a total roller coaster. I would say there's been some ups and downs, mostly downs, and I would say the majority of my life, I denied my epilepsy. Since I was diagnosed so young, I felt like I just, tried to deny that I didn't have it. I didn't want something wrong with me. And I didn't want to tell anybody because maybe I would be made fun of. And I just tried to pretend I wasn't having absent seizures when I kind of knew they were happening. And I would say maybe up to 3 years ago, I still denied it. And I just remember clear as day, me noticing I have absent seizures, noticing I'm not feeling well, and just pretending that they were gonna go away. And I had a really hard time communicating with, the people I love, my husband, my friends, my family, wherever I was at the time, that, I wasn't feeling well, I was having an absent seizure. Maybe it wasn't the best time to be where I was and I had to go rest. And it just kind of ended up being not the best experience at the time, because usually when I have an absent seizure, it leads to a tonic-clonic. Not all the time, but just looking back at those moments, it's like I could have avoided that situation if I would have communicated with the people I was around. But since I denied it for so long, it just ended up being the worst case scenario. I finally learned, throughout my diagnosis, I would say maybe 3-5 years ago, I started sharing online and on Instagram and kind of built a community and made friends through online and social media of other people who have epilepsy, because my whole life being diagnosed with epilepsy, I didn't know anybody, and I think that made it really hard, and I just felt so alone that going through maybe the first, I would say, 15 years of my diagnosis, I felt so alone. I didn't know anybody. I couldn't talk to anybody who understood what I was going through. And then when I finally decided to share my experience on epilepsy, it was about when I was, I would say, 27, 28, maybe a little earlier. I was going through a really rough time with my epilepsy, and I was like, you know what, I think I should really start sharing online. Maybe I'll find some friends, maybe I'll find some people who are going through the same thing as me. It just ended up being a whole community. I ended up getting to know people who are involved with Epilepsy Canada, and it was just honestly the best experience going forward with my epilepsy, and it just made it so much easier to live with. I've faced many challenges with my diagnosis. I had to really figure out what I could do and couldn't do, what was safe for me and wasn't safe for me going throughout my life. I really had to give up some things I love. For example, driving, I ended up, getting my license taken away a couple times because of having seizures. It kind of led into a way where I had to reapply to get my license, and at the time, it felt very defeating. It was kind of just my epilepsy is taking away something I love. It's taking away freedom. It's taking away something that, everybody else can do, and why can't I do it? So it kind of led to something that I had to accept. Some things I had to give up as well is drinking. That's a seizure trigger for me. So it was hard to be in social settings with people when I finally decided, I can't drink anymore. I can't consume alcohol. It's not good for me. And so that was really tough at the time too, because like I said, going to social gatherings, going out with friends, that's what you're surrounded by. And I was just kind of the odd one out because, that leads to, why aren't you drinking? And then it's me saying, I have epilepsy. That's a trigger for my seizures. So it's kind of like a snowball effect of giving up something that, you can't do anymore where other people can do, and then people question why. And then it kind of leads into, me telling people that I have epilepsy. And again, I think that's a huge step in growth, because otherwise people would be really embarrassed, and totally understand why people would be embarrassed to kind of share that, try and tell people that this is why I can't do this. So I feel like the challenges definitely made it hard going forward, and some people do understand and some people don't, so that's kind of hard too, sharing my experience with epilepsy, like the stigma around it, some misconceptions. So it's just really hard to navigate through some days and in some situations. When it comes to medication, I feel like I have been on a journey. I've tried so many medications, and I feel like maybe up till 3 years ago, I finally found 2 medications that worked for me. I would say throughout my whole diagnosis, it was like I felt like I was a guinea pig. I was tested with new medications, what worked, what didn't work, and, side effects, what made my body feel very, weak, or, what made my body feel good. And so there's always a risk taking new medication, because you don't know what it's going to do to your body. You don't know how it's going to react. You don't know if it's going to help manage your seizures. In the end, I would say the 2 medications that I'm on right now have really helped with my body, and my body has just adjusted to how it interacts with my body. There's still side effects that I deal with these medications every day, and I think at this point there's no getting away from side effects. I feel like everybody who has epilepsy and is on medication deal with side effects, so it's just kind of, that's the risk we take with taking medication, and that's just how we have to cope with it. I think funding epilepsy research is so important. I think people kind of forget about epilepsy when it comes to funding research to find a cure. So that's why it's just super important to me to really promote it and to really encourage people to consider, donating, because there's people out there like myself who live with epilepsy every day, and a lot of people forget about it. Like I said, there's different chronic illnesses out there, there's different diseases out there that people like to fund as well, but I feel like epilepsy gets forgotten about a little bit. So I think it's super important. It just gives us hope in the end that hopefully in the future there will be a cure, and just funding epilepsy research is one step closer to getting a cure.